Let's start with the first presentation for today, which is from the Métis Nation of Ontario as outlined in CMD 15H 2.117. I understand that Ms. Richardson will make the presentation. Please proceed.
My name is Pauline Richardson, and I am the Regional Councillor for the Métis Nation of Ontario Region 7 and the Chair of the Georgian Bay Traditional Territory Consultation Committee. With me today are Mr. Ali Alabai, Director of MNO's Land Resources and Consultation Branch, Ms. Candice Metallic, Legal Counsel to the MNO, and Ms. Tammy Sugarman, Energy Project Team Manager with Blue Metric Environmental. Also here today are members of the Georgian Bay Traditional Territory Consultation Committee, Mr. David Dussaume, Mr. Larry Duval, and Mr. Peter Couture. Mr. James Wagger, Manager in the MNO Lands and Resource and Consultation Branch. I wish to start by saying that the Métis Nation of Ontario has been engaged with Bruce Power since the signing of a relationship agreement on September 25, 2012. This has included the sharing of the MNO's initial concerns related to the application and Bruce Power's ongoing commitment to the MNO to address these concerns. The MNO has enjoyed a positive and constructive working relationship with Bruce Power. The MNO today wishes to share some concerns regarding the relicensing application for Bruce A and B. This is based on the fact that the Métis Nation of Ontario has Aboriginal rights in the lands, waters, and natural resources within the area where the Bruce Power nuclear generating stations are located. I will now turn the floor over to the MNO Legal Counsel, Ms. Candice Metallic, to deliver our presentation to the Commission. Thank you.
Good morning. I'd just like to start by thanking the Commission for giving us this opportunity to address you today and to present the submissions, the oral submissions for the Métis Nation of Ontario. In the limited time that we have today, we do not intend to review in any level of detail the Métis Nation of Ontario's written submission that has been filed with the Commission, nor do we wish to review in any level of detail the law of consultation and accommodation. We're quite fully aware and confident that the Commission has reviewed the MNO's written submissions and are fully aware of the Commission's legal duties with respect to this important matter. Rather, the MNO will take our time to make three distinct points. First, the Métis people that live in and around the traditional harvesting territory of Georgian Bay assert that they possess and exercise existing Aboriginal rights that are protected by Section 35 of the Constitution Act, 1982. The MNO further assert that the Métis rights, interests, and way of life may be impacted by the license renewals of nuclear power generation at Bruce A and Bruce B. In the spirit of reconciliation, this Commission ought to ensure that the full nature and scope of the impacts are known and that appropriate measures are taken to mitigate those impacts in contemplation of future generation of nuclear power at Bruce A and B. The second point we wish to make: Bruce A and B have been subject to numerous environmental and socioeconomic studies. However, none of these studies specifically consider or focused on the distinct impacts of nuclear power generation on Métis interests, rights, and way of life. In fact, the Environmental Assessment Study Report for Bruce A Refurbishment for Life Extension and Continued Operation Project, dated December of 2005 and approved by this Commission in 2006, does not specifically address the impacts on Métis fishing, hunting, and trapping activities, because these were not identified as valued ecosystem components. Throughout the licensing process for Bruce A and B, the constitutional rights, interests, and way of life of the Métis were considered no differently than the general population in this region. Such an approach is not consistent with Section 35 of the Constitution. The Métis have not had the financial and technical resources to undertake their own independent studies, environmental studies, with respect to Bruce A and B. The MNO has, however, made an attempt to review and assess the information available through the CNSC license renewal process in order to identify the areas of potential impacts on the Métis. And these are set out in detail in the Métis Nation of Ontario's written submission. Examples of potential distinct impacts on the Métis identified in our review include, but are not limited to, the following: changes in water flow and circulation that may cause serious harm to fish species and fish habitat in the areas associated with the Métis fishery. Increased lake water temperatures that may have an adverse effect on Métis fishery through increased presence of other fish species. Exclusion of fish species integral to the Métis fishery for important follow-up, monitoring, and entrainment activities. And the specific species we're referring to are the yellow perch and the smallmouth bass. Partial radiological contamination testing of fish and wild food regularly consumed by the Métis people. Potential radiological contamination of medicinal terrestrial plants that are sacred to the Métis. Lack of radiation testing or monitoring of Métis people as a distinct group, given their regular consumption of wild foods, animals, and fish. Clearly, there's an important gap that needs to be filled. While the MNO has not had resources to undertake a focused impact assessment, the MNO would like to acknowledge, again, the positive working relationship it has forged with Bruce Power. They've committed to work together to assess the impacts of the generating stations on the environment and on the Métis' rights, interests, and way of life, and further to accommodate any identified adverse impacts. The scoping of impacts may be conducted through reviews and studies as agreed to by the parties. While this work has not yet been undertaken, the MNO respectfully submits that the licensing renewals for Bruce A and Bruce B must be taken into full consideration. Accordingly, the MNO submits that the performance of these important studies ought to form a condition of the licenses if renewed. The third point we wish to make is to request that the Commission closely consider and grant the MNO's 15 requests that are detailed in our written submission. All of these requests, which are summarized at page 26 of our submission, are aimed at identifying, mitigating, accommodating, and monitoring adverse impacts to Métis interests, rights, and way of life. We note that this Commission possesses the necessary authority in the Nuclear Safety Control Act at subsection 24(5) to impose any term or condition that the Commission considers necessary for the purposes of this Act. The MNO respectfully requests that the Commission exercise its discretion to impose the conditions requested by the MNO and to oversee the work necessary to ensure that the Métis are meaningfully consulted, any adverse impacts on their rights and interests are accommodated, and that they participate in important follow-up monitoring programs. We thank you for your time and attention to this issue and concerns expressed by the MNO in both our written and our oral submissions.
Thank you.